Ah, yes, Election Day. What a normal and peaceful day in America, in our republic, as the people can vote to peacefully change the system of power. Right, they're rioting again. For those of you wondering, yes, I am totally using Election Day to milk views out of this, and two, it is also an IR assignment, so I might as well. I know you read the video title. This is about Trump and Harris on foreign policy. Due to the premise of this argument, hence it being about foreign policy, I'm going to cut out everything not foreign and everything not policy. No domestic, no tweets, no stumbling on stairs, none of that. These people are policymakers, so let's look at their policy. First off, we have Trump. So I looked this up on the Council of Foreign Relations website, and after I read some other articles, I mean, they're not very pro-Trump at all, so that means you could take this, ironically. 2017, he pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, limited refugees in Syria, and began the building of the border wall, which then he struck Assad's regime. Be careful to pronounce that right. He bombed their chemical plants after learning that they used them on civilians. That he tried to build an alliance against radical Islam in the Middle East, attending a summit at Riyadh by more than 50 Arab countries. And at the same time, he called on NATO to actually fulfill what it said it would pay. He also withdrew from the Paris Climate Accords, and this is actually what caused a lot of jobs and a lot of money to flow back to America. We weren't limiting ourselves. Several Arab states declared that Qatar is supporting terrorists, and I mean, that's literally where Hamas's leaders now reside, so go figure. Trump supported them despite the fact that an important US airbase and HQ was also in Qatar. He also rolled back an estranged Cuba halfway, still kept diplomatic relations though. He also threatened that if North Korea continued to launch nuclear missile tests, that it would be met with, quote, fire and fury. He was also in the UN for the first time, and Trump brings in this kind of new version of mad. He threatened to, quote, totally destroy North Korea if the US is forced to defend itself or its allies. I wonder what they think now. Then he backed out of JCPOA, that is a lot of letters, which is basically an agreement with Iran. He also asked Congress to impose sanctions. Then he labeled Iran's secret police, the Quds Force, as a terrorist organization, basically that kept Iran out of any secret deals they were trying to make. Trump also reinforced his allies in Japan, Vietnam, South Korea, and the Philippines, and he even sat on the sidelines during a meeting of ASEAN, and he actually attended the APEC. And he ended off the year by recognizing Jerusalem. In March 2018, this is in the 2018 year, he imposed steel and aluminum tariffs on China. China retaliated with about $3 billion worth of goods, and Trump responded with $250 billion of goods. Good Lord. At the G20 summit, the two nations struck a ceasefire. And then Trump strikes Syria again, targeting chemical weapons manufacturing, enacts the sanctions on Iran, specifically targeting oil and petroleum products. Not just oil, not anything made with those, which is interesting. Then he moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, further reinforcing the recognization of the capital. Kim Jong-un actually invited Trump to a summit. Trump actually accepted, becoming the first ever sitting president to meet with the North Korean leader at any time ever since Kim Il-sung to Kim Jong-un and all of the presidents since 1950 that's ever sat with a North Korean leader while in power. They meet in Singapore to discuss the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We know how well that went. The U.S. withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council, citing abuses by many of the members, specifically mentioning Venezuela and China. The United States, Canada, and Mexico also settled through a number of changes to NAFTA in ways that mostly benefit American workers. And Trump announces that the U.S. will also draw all of its troops from Syria, and he tries to also withdraw from Afghanistan, and he doesn't really specify a timeline, but it's more just like, we're going to do this. 2019, the White House recognizes the Venezuelan opposition leader. This is basically when Venezuela had its kind of coup moment, I guess. When Trump tried to send humanitarian aid to the area, they were actually blocked at the border, and Trump actually even refused to rule out military action. As trade talks break down in China, the U.S. raises tariffs on another $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, leading China to retaliate in kind. More restrictions on China. Threatens to halt all private U.S. investment in China. Trump's plan to raise tariffs on an additional $300 billion. Oh my God. This is what you get when you get the world's two biggest economies going at it. Iran also downs the U.S. drone, and Trump actually authorized. My English is not English. Military action on Iran in retaliation. However, he actually avoided this last second. Trump also became the first sitting U.S. president to set foot in North Korea, crossing the DMZ for a brief meeting with Kim, cooling down stuff with North Korea. But neither side offered concrete concessions, and North Korea soon resumed their missile tests. Trump announces a safe third country agreement with Guatemala. This was like basically the Remain in Mexico treaty, where you would be prosecuted, and you would have asylum in either your home country or somewhere in Central Latin America. That was basically to avoid people from, doing what they do now. Trump also decides to withdraw all remaining troops from the Kurdish-controlled northern Syria. 2 days later, Turkish troops invade Syria to combat the Kurdish groups, and the Kurds seek protection from Assad's regime and the Russian allies. The Trump administration actually responds with sanctions against Turkey, even though it was a NATO member, which led to talks for a permanent ceasefire. Ironically enough, that led to peace. In the wake of the September attack on the Saudi oil facilities that Riyadh blames on Iran, Trump decided to reinforce the kingdom with 3,000 U.S. troops as well as fighter jets and missile technology. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi has been killed. I'm butchering that pronunciation. ISIS is dead, pretty much. I'm sorry if this is boring, by the way, but policy is boring. You're not going to get, your nice little tweets or anything or drama. This is just policy. Interesting to me. I don't know if it's interesting to you. In 2020, a U.S. drone strike killed Soleimani, the commander of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Oh my God, let me say that again. The Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Quds Force. A longer name does not mean you're better. Soleimani. I'm gonna give up on pronouncing these words. I think this is where it got to the point that they couldn't even sell pistachios. In a joint White House appearance, Trump and Netanyahu announced a new plan to end decades of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Analysts say the deal favors Israel by awarding portions of the West Bank and Jerusalem and by weakening the long-standing U.S. support for autonomous Palestinian state. I'll try to find that map here. The Palestinian leaders, of course, reject the proposal because it gave a bunch of land to Israel. U.S. and Taliban officials ink a deal to reduce hostilities, heralded as a major step for the long drawn-out effort to end Afghanistan's 18-year war. In exchange for a withdrawal of U.S. troops, the Taliban actually agrees to open talks with the Afghan government and prevent other terrorist groups from using Afghanistan to attack the U.S. or other countries. Now we have COVID. Yay. Initially downplaying the risk of a new coronavirus, COVID-19, Trump declares a national emergency as cases balloon. The move unlocks roughly $50 billion in federal funding and allows the loosens of some regulations. At the UN General Assembly, held virtually for the very first time, due to the coronavirus, Trump blames China for the pandemic and accuses it of environmental pollution and trade abuses. The Trump administration formally notifies the United Nations that the U.S. will cut ties with the WHO, the World Health Organization, which it founded, effective July 2021. Now, I don't want to have to edit 20 minutes of video, but it's looking like I am going to, so forgive me if I speed through all the rest of this. Basically, withdraw 12,000 troops from Germany in response to Germany not making the financial commitments of NATO. Netanyahu and Israel normalizes relations with Bahrain and the UAE. I think he got the Nobel Peace Prize for this. Sudan and Morocco, as a response to the Bahrain and UAE settling down with Israel, Sudan and Morocco will also begin rapprochements with Israel, and in exchange, the U.S. would grant Sudan financial assistance, and it would delist it as a state sponsor of terrorism. And in response from Morocco, it would recognize its claim over Western Sahara. The government announces a plan to slash refugee admissions to a maximum of 15,000 people. That's mostly in response to COVID. The U.S. formally exits the treaty on open skies. Russia didn't really comply, so the U.S. just left it. And that's the end of Trump's term in terms of foreign policy. Unfortunately, I have not been able to find such a massively comprehensive and just normally anti-bias type of thing for Biden or Kamala. Well, Kamala, because she hasn't been president yet. However, I have been able to do some research in Biden, and it looks like he's, ironically enough, kind of doing a watered-down version of Trump's protectionism. Some of the sanctions on China. He also basically kept exchanging Cuba, among other things. He did get really lax on Iran, and not really lax on Russia, but it turned into more of a war of words than actual diplomacy. And I'm not sure if he's dealt with North Korea as much. He's definitely favoring towards protectionism. I don't know if Harris will, and I would assume it would say roughly the same as Biden, and if not, it would definitely go further from Trump. Now, there is going to be a big difference between protectionism and isolationism, which this will be pretty much the final part of the video where I explain it to you, because I feel like there's a bunch of confusion. Trump was a protectionist, and people keep confusing him with an isolationist. I think the main difference is protectionist basically puts your country's needs and interests above everybody else's. However, it does not negate involvement. This is actually something that Joe Biden did and continued through Trump. U.S. interests were prioritized over other nations, and this kind of made the world mad. But so did Trump. It's not really like there's been a ginormous change in foreign policy. There has been a lot of lax stuff. The difference is that isolationism is a lot like Japan, where it would isolate yourself, it would isolate your economy, you'd isolate your culture. Isolationism basically wants a return to the 1860s or the 1930s, where you just basically detached from the world. Protectionism is basically the America First doctrine, which is putting being involved in the world just like Trump was. Like, you can't tell me that Trump was not. Like, Trump was involved, but you can definitely have to say that he definitely did not prioritize other countries' needs above America's. Protectionism, and that is something Joe Biden was, ironically enough, a pundit of, even if it executed not as great as it could have been. And when it comes to Harris, is that I think that she will basically be a continuation of Biden's policy. Nothing really new to the Democrats. She is tackling AI. She said that she has a plan to tackle AI and normalize our relations with China, which I don't know how that's exactly gonna work. I mean, she hasn't really put forward a specific plan. But again, I say that if I were to consider the policies of Harris and compare them with the policies of Trump, I would look what under the Biden administration, what it did in foreign policy. And ironically enough, yeah, Biden pulled out of Afghanistan just a little bit faster than Trump would have. He did continue that plan too as well. But yeah, there you go. You really kind of have to look at Trump and Biden if you really want to look at it from the past in terms of foreign policy. I'm very sure Harris will be a continuation of Biden, except with a little bit more nuanced, as in more anti-Russia and less anti-China, as well as just really having to deal with the AI thing. I think that's going to be a big thing. But other than that, see you in the next one.